Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1274 of the Juicebox Podcast. One minute, Emmeline was running a 5K, and the next minute, she was at the doctor's office saying she didn't feel well. Now she has type 1 diabetes. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. drinkag1.com/juicebox. Are you a U.S. resident who has type 1 diabetes or is the caregiver of someone with type 1? If you are and you'd like to help with type 1 diabetes research from your home, you can do that at t1dexchange.org/juicebox, and all you have to do is take a survey. I know that Facebook has a bad reputation, but please give the private Facebook group for the Juicebox Podcast a healthy once-over. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. The group now has 47,000 members in it. It gets 150 new members a day. It is completely free, and at the very least, you can watch other people talk about diabetes. And everybody is welcome. Type 1, type 2, gestational, loved ones, everyone is welcome. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Cozy Earth. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout at CozyEarth.com, and you will save 40% off of your entire order. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. This is the meter that my daughter has on her person right now. It is incredibly accurate and waiting for you at contournext.com/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the only implantable sensor rated for long-term wear, up to 6 months, the Eversense CGM. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox.
Well, my name's Emmeline, and I've had type 1 diabetes for almost a year and a half.
Oh, you're new. How old are you?
I'm 26 years old.
Oh, my goodness. Was it surprising? Not that, can you imagine? I don't think there are many people who are like, oh my God, I got type 1 diabetes. I was completely waiting for this. But, you know what I mean? Like in your family or anything like that?
Nope, no family history. Everyone's got like the family history of like the smattering of type 2 diabetes, but no type 1 diabetes, not that many like autoimmune diseases in my family. And yeah, it came on, well, it was like a very like atypical diagnosis because I had none of the classic symptoms. I'm a nurse. And so like in nursing school, you learn about your typical diagnosis symptoms, and I had none of them.
Oh, no kidding. So real quickly, there are some autoimmune in your family? There is some?
I have an uncle that has RA, and then I think I have a couple cousins that have celiac disease, but that's the extent of it.
Okay. So, but diabetes definitely wasn't on your radar. And
correct.
Talk about what you learned in nursing school.
Well, I think it's just kind of like always in the back of your head when you like take care of someone with diabetes. You learn about it being like the sudden onset of thirst or the frequent urination. And I do feel like, I've been out of nursing school for almost 5 years now, and people talk about it as, still like a pediatric illness. Like most people are diagnosed as kids. Like obviously you can be diagnosed as an adult, but I feel like I never had any education about like, it's, we're seeing it more diagnosed as adults rather than like we're seeing it diagnosed just in kids, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's one of those things I hear said. I don't know. Like, I don't know why that would make total sense. That why would there be more adults diagnosed with type 1, in 2000 than in 1990? But maybe there's, I'm sure there's possibly reasons. I think it's more about that's the messaging from before. And so that becomes the messaging now. This is a kid's thing, people will point out sometimes that the JDRF maybe didn't do it any favors for adults by calling it the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation,
Right, exactly. And I did hear, like, when I was shortly diagnosed, I got connected with someone from JDRF, and they were like, there has been some talks about changing the name. But like, it's also one of those things where it's like JDRF is such like a stronghold in the type 1 community that's hard to imagine it going by any other name.
Yeah. I mean, what's next? Are we going to change the name of of baseball? You want to start calling it something else? Like we're
exactly
maybe stuck with what it is at this point. Not that it's a horror, I understand, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But I guess what people might expect, like I've never gone to nursing school, but I bet you the layperson hears that and thinks, everything. But it's, what is it? A couple of pages per thing? Like
exactly. Yeah. It's very little information. And also like nursing school is like, it is what it is. It's like, it's school. It's like you learn a little bit about a lot of things. And then it's once maybe you're post grad and you get a job, then you're kind of specializing in whatever focus area you want. And for me, that was not endocrinology. It wasn't diabetes. So kind of that all got pushed to like the back burner. And then I was diagnosed and I was like, oh my God, I got to remember all this stuff now.
Was it scary?
I mean, I think I was in denial for a long time. I like initially went in, I hadn't been feeling right. Like, I feel like that's the best way to describe it. Like, I had been gaining weight, which you're like, oh, that's the opposite of what you usually see.
Mm-hmm.
And I was training for a 5K. I ran this 5K and was like feeling good. I went in to see my primary and she like, oh, let's just do some labs, maybe it's a thyroid issue. And my A1C came back as 7.4. And I was like immediately Googling, like, what are reasons for your A1C to be falsely elevated? Like, I was like, there's no way this is diabetes. Like, I'm a young, healthy 25-year-old. Like,
this isn't
can't
happening.
Be any of those things.
But
I was
A1C, you knew.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
You were like, okay, I know that's about diabetes. And you were hoping it was about something else, I'm guessing. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense CGM. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. The Eversense CGM is the only long-term CGM with 6 months of real-time glucose readings, giving you more convenience, confidence, and flexibility. And you didn't hear me wrong. I didn't say 14 days. I said 6 months. So if you're tired of changing your CGM sensor every week, you're tired of it falling off or the adhesive not lasting as long as it should or the sensor failing before the time is up, if you're tired of all that, you really owe it to yourself to try the Eversense CGM. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. I'm here to tell you that if the hassle of changing your sensors multiple times a month is just more than you want to deal with, if you're tired of things falling off and not sticking or sticking too much or having to carry around a whole bunch of extra supplies in case something does fall off, then taking a few minutes to check out EversenseCGM.com/juicebox might be the right thing for you. When you use my link, you're supporting the production of the podcast and helping to keep it free and plentiful. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. All I can tell you is you guys must love CozyEarth.com because every time I think these guys can't keep buying ads from me, like how long are they going to do this? They're just like, give me more. And I'm like, ooh, the juice boxers love the Cozy Earth apparently. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% off of your entire order. That's whatever you put in that cart. I'm talking about women's or men's clothes, skincare items, bath towels you're going to love rubbing your ass on them, I'm telling you. Bedding that is to die for, to sleep in, and these beautiful shorts I'm wearing, my sweatshirt, my joggers, everything they make is luxury. It's quality. It holds up wash after wash after wash. I'm not kidding you. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX. Be as happy as I am.
Yeah, I was hoping it was like, maybe about like my hemoglobin or something because I was taking a bunch of like supplements at the time, like over-the-counter vitamins, nothing crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe it's because of that. And my primary was like, I don't think that's what it's from.
That's not how this works.
Yeah.
How long did you kind of cling to that hope?
Probably a couple weeks because it took me, they had me seen within like the next couple days. They gave me a glucometer and they're like, okay, well, we want you to start testing your blood sugar once a day, 2 hours after meals, at bedtime, fasting, yada, yada, yada. And they're like, and while we're waiting, we'll run the antibody panel to see, is this type 2 or is this more autoimmune related?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of like frantically Googling for 2 weeks, trying to be like, oh, it can't be diabetes. And lo and behold, it was.
This is likely something else. I probably have the flu.
Right.
Yeah. Well, when that dissipates, when that hope goes away and you realize you have type 1, is there a big shift in your life? How do you tackle it?
I think the biggest thing for me was like trying to figure out, like, I had a little bit of a honeymoon. Like, they started me on some metformin. Like, they were like, your C-peptide is okay for right now. Took a while to get into an endocrinologist, even though they put in like an urgent consult. But I was kind of just like, I wasn't one of those people that showed up in the ER in DKA.
Right.
And so it was like, all of this education I'm getting outpatient. I'm not getting it in the hospital. I'm not getting like, an emergency Dexcom like provided by the hospital. And so it's like, it was a lot of figuring out like, okay, well, I need to take some time off of work to get to all these doctor's appointments. And so I was like trying to get my shifts traded, work with my manager. And then it was kind of like, but the endocrinologist I saw was phenomenal. I still see him. And he was like, we're kind of in like a watch and wait. Like, we're going to wait until your body shows us that it needs insulin. And I had like a glorious 6 weeks. And that was all I lasted without needing any insulin.
Then full blown, here's a basal meal insulin pumps, that whole thing came right away.
Exactly. Yeah. I started out on pens like most people do, but it was like the day after Christmas in 2022. And we were together. My family was gathering for Christmas. And at the time I had the Libre 3 because it had just come out and they were like, oh, this is like the newest thing. It's so great. Updates every minute. And it just kept reading high. And I was like, all right, we are somewhere over 500, over 400. Like, what am I going to do? So they sent me to the ER and they gave me some fluid. They never ended up needing to give me any insulin. Mm-hmm. But I talked to my endocrinologist the next day and he's like, I think it's time. And I'm like, yeah, I think so.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time. Now, did your nursing background help or hinder this process?
It helped so much. Like I knew all about like the duration of time for different types of insulin. Like I knew generally about carb counting. Like it was more so like in my nursing practice, which I still find this a little frustrating. I feel like I work in a hospital and I feel like in the hospital, it's very much still like how many carb choices are you doing per meals, which I think is just really confusing because you're like, okay, well, one choice is 15 grams. Why can't I just count the grams of carbs that like I'm using? And so having all that info, I felt like made the process a lot less scary. And I would say like, I don't think I was ever someone that was like afraid of insulin because I knew how it worked. I knew how to treat a low. We just kind of got juice on hand. We got fruit snacks on hand. And I just was like, okay, well, this is what's got to happen.
And you just went with it. You didn't fight it. You didn't like cry. Did you say, why me? Anything?
Oh, I had lots of those moments.
Oh, okay.
Lots of like tears, lots of like, complaining to my husband, being like, yeah, why me? Why now? I still have those moments, but definitely didn't fight it. And I think the biggest part of that was because we knew we wanted to try to start a family within within 6 months to a year of being diagnosed. And I was like, there is no way I'm going to be able to do this with a A1C of 7.4.
You were pretty honeymoonish, like you caught it really kind of quickly.
Yeah. I think it could have, I do wonder like just how long I had it for. I had COVID in April of 2022 and was diagnosed in October. And so part of me is like, was that the viral illness that brought it on? But then I remember like back in college, I would occasionally do night shifts for working clinicals or for my capstone project. And I had a lot of reactive hypoglycemia. Like I would wake up and be like drenched in sweat. I'd be shaky. I could like barely get out of bed to eat something. And so part of me wonders like maybe this has been going on for like a long time and it's just been very slowly progressing.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it was so odd. And now that like, I mean, I don't even think I knew what reactive hypoglycemia was at the time, but looking back, I'm like, oh, I had that all the time.
ContourNext.com/juicebox. That's the link you'll use to find out more about the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. When you get there, there's a little bit at the top. You can click right on blood glucose monitoring. I'll do it with you. Go to meters, click on any of the meters. I'll click on the NextGen, and you're going to get more information. It's easy to use and highly accurate. SmartLight provides a simple understanding of your blood glucose levels. And of course, with second chance sampling technology, you can save money with fewer wasted test strips. As if all of that wasn't enough, the Contour NextGen also has a compatible app for an easy way to share and see your blood glucose results. ContourNext.com/juicebox. And if you scroll down at that link, you're going to see things like a buy now button. You could register your meter after you purchase it. Or what is this? Download a coupon. Oh, receive a free Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. Do tell. ContourNext.com/juicebox. Head over there now. Get the same accurate and reliable meter that we use. Do you go to people you work with for advice?
Not really. Mostly because I feel like we are in the same knowledge base that I was when I was diagnosed, which is like a very limited understanding of what type 1 diabetes is. Mm-hmm. And nowadays I work in the hospital, I work in labor and delivery. And so we see a lot of patients with gestational diabetes. And so I feel like a lot of my coworkers, gestational diabetes is more so at the forefront of their mind. And that is just, it's so different than type 1. Like I want more people to understand that like treating a type 1 like a gestational diabetic is the wrong way to approach things.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of people being managed kind of improperly in a hospital setting?
I think it kind of depends. I hate the word compliant because I feel like it's a very loaded word, but like, I think it kind of depends on how like compliant they have been throughout their pregnancy. It's hard because you have some people that really want to manage it with just like diet and lifestyle choices. And they don't understand that like, this isn't something that you're doing. Like your body is literally creating hormones because you have a placenta right now. And you know, you can't fight it. Like it's not like it's type 2 diabetes. You can't just manage it with lifestyle choices all the time. Mm-hmm. So then it seems like there's a little bit of a battle when we have patients that come in because they'll be like, well, I haven't needed insulin my whole pregnancy. And then they come into labor and delivery and their fasting blood sugar is 200. And it's like, okay, well, we got to do something about this.
Yeah. So, you bring something up that I've been picking through a lot in some of my other episodes. Yeah, I'm talking to a lot of healthcare people and I'm sort of doing this sort of dual thing at the same time. I'm talking to some anonymously and they're kind of dishing on what they see at work that they're like, this is not great. Mm-hmm. But, at the end of all these conversations, I ask all the time, like, well, what can we do better? And when people are really being honest, they say, look, on our side, it's not great all the time. And we're also dealing with a lot of people who don't understand their diabetes at all and or maybe don't want to put the full effort into it. And, I kind of turn it back on them and I say, well, while that's not you, right? You, the person in the emergency room or the person in labor and delivery, you didn't start this person off on their life with diabetes, but some doctor did. Right. Somewhere in that building's the person who started them off on the wrong path. And now they end up with you pregnant 5 years later or 20 years later in the ER or something like that. The answer can't be, well, they're not trying hard, because if you ask them, they're going to say, well, no one's explained it to me.
Right.
We're stuck in that meme where Spider-Man's pointing to himself in 3 different positions. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to make a meme like that. I'm writing that down right now. Nobody steal this. It's difficult to, like, somewhere we have to start over. Like, and in my mind, it's got to be with early education. That's all.
Yes. Yeah. And I do feel like throughout my, year and a half I've had type 1 diabetes, I've probably seen maybe 4 or 5 different diabetes educators. And I do feel like there's been a huge spectrum of different. It's kind of like nursing. It's like all healthcare professionals. Like there are some educators that focus on some parts of diabetes, type 1, type 2, gestational, and others that focus on other parts. Like, and so sometimes it feels like, you just get scheduled with the first educator that has appointment available. And I was scheduled with someone who wasn't trained on any pumps. And so I was like, okay, well, I know that I want to pump eventually, but I loved her, like her education style and the way she was working with me. She already acknowledged my background. She wasn't trying to speak to me like I didn't have any information about this already in my brain. And then I got to like another educator who was educated on pumps when I was getting ready to start my pump. And it was like we were back at square zero. Like she was like explaining insulin to me. And I was like, I don't need that. I just need info on pump management. And so it's like, if someone gets scheduled with an educator and they don't know that there's someone else out there, then it's again, setting up that process for a long road ahead of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Geez. It's only been a year, huh?
Yeah. Like a little less than a year and a half, I think.
How did it, if it did impact your personal relationships, did it?
It did. I think a lot of people in my family and around me, like, again, I do have a lot of healthcare professionals in my family. So like they did understand the difference between like type 1 versus type 2. But a lot of people are still kind of like, well, how have your blood sugars been? And I'll be like, oh, they've been good. And then they're kind of like, that's kind of the extent of it. So I feel like, thankfully my husband has been like my rock. He was kind of dove in head first with me to try to understand things. But then it's hard. I tried kind of connecting with other people that were young adults that were diagnosed as young adults and kind of found some people, but like, it's just a whole different ball game.
Yeah. And
so it does still, I would say it does feel fairly isolating most of the time. And like, even though I have supportive coworkers, supportive family, like it just, a lot of times you're kind of sitting with that, like, no one gets it. No one understands it. Like no one understands like the mental load of it.
Yeah. You have a perspective that they're not going to have without diabetes.
Right.
Yeah. Your husband tries to understand?
He does. Yeah. He doesn't work in healthcare. So like, he's not bringing that perspective in. I think if he had worked in healthcare, we probably would have like killed each other, like trying to argue over like the right way to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
But he's gotten more concerned. So I'm currently pregnant right now.
Congratulations.
In my pregnancy. Thank you. Yeah. I've had several instances of like severe hypoglycemia. Like I was in the ER once because of it. And so he follows me on my Dexcom. And so now his head is like, he kind of jumps to the worst whenever this happens.
Mm-hmm.
He's, I think, just a little more like cautious, walking on eggshells now because he's like, was that a compression low texting me? Or he's like, or are you in the ER again and I need to drop everything and come get you?
How long have you been married?
It'll be 4 years this fall.
I've heard some people talk about this feeling of looking back at a spouse, especially if you haven't been together too long, and thinking, oh, this isn't what they signed up for. Have you wondered that? If they've had that thought? He has?
I don't think I've ever like necessarily wondered that, but like, I mean, even a few nights ago, I had a new Dexcom, was reading low, and I had left my bag of supplies downstairs. Our bedroom is on the second level of our house.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm like 30 weeks pregnant. So I'm like all settled into bed and he's frustrated because it keeps beeping. He's trying to sleep. He's trying to work in the morning. And I'm like, can you go get my stuff for me? I left it downstairs and he's, understandably like getting a little upset because he's trying to sleep. He goes and gets it for me. And then of course I'm pregnant. I'm emotional. And so I like kind of start getting a little weepy and he's like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to react like that. I know you need this. Like, it's not on you. It just is a reaction I had. And so sometimes I'm kind of like, yeah, it's not fair that he didn't sign up for this either. But right. Thankfully, I feel like those moments come fairly few and far between.
That's good. I'm sure they'll get better as time goes on too.
Yeah, I hope so.
So let's talk about what you did to get from where you started to being ready to be, because it sounds like you got pregnant on purpose, right?
Yes. Yeah, we were trying.
Yeah.
Yep.
So where'd you begin? What was your journey like through your A1Cs? And, did you have to be told what your goals were? Did you know right away? when you were thinking about pregnancy?
I kind of had known, like, I knew that the range was lower in pregnancy. And so I think, when I had started on insulin, I think a large part of this is I can attribute to my endocrinologist, who very much was like, you're a healthcare professional. You know how insulin works. You know how your body works. So I'm going to let you, guide your care. And then you let me know what's working. And so, of course, started out on like sliding scale, and it was way too low. Like I would give myself 3 units of insulin and it would it wouldn't even touch me.
Right.
So I kind of I started increasing my dose, it's a lot of trial and error, like giving myself 5 units and then being like, okay, that was either enough, or then 45 minutes later, I'm tanking and being like, oh, okay, that was too much. So it was a lot of figuring that out and doing it on my own. And he was super supportive. He was like, okay, sounds good. Just keep me updated with your total dose so that I can keep a updated prescription for you. Mm-hmm. So I was doing that. And then in February of last year, I started on the Omnipod 5.
Okay.
So what was that, 4 months after I was diagnosed, I think?
Mm-hmm.
About 4 months after I was diagnosed. And then switched to Dexcom. I had been using the Libre 3. And I feel like I can attribute a lot of my lowered A1C to that, because I eventually, I want to say it was I went from 7.4 down to 7. And then I dropped all the way down to 5.9 on the Omnipod. And then I think my next one was 5.7. So I already knew I was sitting in a pretty good range, but I'm also, self-admittedly 100% a perfectionist, and was like, oh, I can do better.
So tell me, mid 7s, then Dexcom knocks off a half a point, Omnipod 5 knocks off a couple more points, and then you kind of settle into a space and start tinkering. Is that about right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And then it was, I had met with an educator through the healthcare system that I'm a part of, and she was kind of I was already in the Facebook group at this point, so I knew about pregnancy ranges. I did a pre-pregnancy consultation with Jenny, and kind of knew that I should just start lowering my parameters. So I think I lowered my goals to 70 to 140 from 70 to 180. Kind of just started being a little more aggressive, especially with corrections. Yeah. And that took a lot of trial and error, because I was 150 before was fine. And it was great compared to, sitting out in the 300s, I had been around Christmas. But then kind of reframing my mindset to be oh, okay, let's try to get it down a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And then I think I found out I was pregnant at the end of July, I want to say. Yeah, end of July, early August. So then I, lowered it even more to the 60 to 140, and have kind of just been messing with settings ever since. Pregnancy has been it's a whole other thing, but
it's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you find basically that what I say about setting lower targets and then acting purposefully to try to get within them is the process you find, right? You get what you expect eventually. But so if you expect better, then I don't mean it magically happens. I mean, if you expect better, then you make different decisions to try to hit those targets. And then you start going, oh, this worked, this didn't. And you make adjustments from there. That's how it worked for you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's almost exactly how it worked. And I think, not having that fear of insulin, honestly, quite frankly, I've probably always been a little too bold with insulin. I think sometimes I would go in to see my endocrinologist and he'd be like, why are you having 10% lows? And I'd be like, well, I'm doing a lot of trial and error right now. It's kind of
I'm in the middle of an experiment right now. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he'd be like, okay, well, are they severe lows? And I'm like, not always. No,
define severe.
Right. Exactly.
How do you define severe?
It's hard, because I feel like before I got pregnant, a severe low for me would be you feel it. You are shaky, you are sweaty, but you can get your own juice. You can get your own things. And now that I'm pregnant, a severe low is I need help. I can't get my own juice. I can't check my own blood sugar. Mm-hmm. And I've probably had I don't know, 5 or 6 of those. during my pregnancy, and they're scary. I mean, like one wound me up in the ER. Like I passed out during one. My husband said I passed out during one. So I'm like, oh, okay.
You're in trouble when you're relying on other people to tell you what happened.
Exactly. Exactly. And I almost have no memory of all of these severe lows. Like I can remember being like, oh, I don't feel right. And then the next thing I remember is I'm like on the floor and being like a juice box in my mouth.
What number puts you in that position?
I don't think it's an exact number because so one of the first few times it happened that I did wound up in the ER was at work. And my coworkers were like I wasn't acting right. It was a really busy shift. And so like, thankfully all my coworkers know I have type 1 diabetes, like not a big deal. They brought me down to the ER and my finger stick was 32. For sure that. But then like, I've also had it happen when I'm, my Dexcom's reading in like the 60s. So it's like, I think it probably is like in the 40s mark that I start to feel like that.
Do you finger stick when you have a low like that eventually, or are you just working on covering it because of how you feel?
Eventually I do. Yeah. So my husband he's refining his finger stick practice because a lot of times he's the one that's doing
panicking.
It for me.
Yeah. What do you think precipitates these lows during pregnancy?
I think it's a combination of like being busy. Like almost all of the times that it's happened, I've either been like at work or doing like a house project. Like I've just been busy, probably ignoring my Dexcom alarms a little bit. Like, urgent low in 20 minutes. Me seeing the arrow and be like, it's sloping downward, but it looks like it's going to level off. And then all of a sudden it's like, 51. And it's like, why? It's not leveling off. You need to start treating. So I think part of it is, oops, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Do you give consideration to what happened prior when you get that alarm? Do you go, hey, look, I just ate 2 hours ago, so I do have a fair amount of active insulin going right now. Maybe I should pay more attention to this versus, a time when you're falling, maybe it's just about activity and you don't have any active insulin?
I do, yeah. Like I'm always looking to see, how much I have on board. But then sometimes it just feels like the situation like almost doesn't fit the Dexcom, or even the finger stick for that meaning. Like,
yeah,
it just is like, I feel fine. And then I check my finger stick and it'll be like 38. And I'll be like, how come I feel fine at 38? But then another time I'll have no insulin on board, finger stick at 50 and be like totally knocked out from it.
You haven't had it long enough maybe to ask this question. I'll ask it anyway. Maybe that'll be your answer. But is this a different scenario during pregnancy than it was prior?
I think it is because I never had a low that I needed like outside intervention with until I got pregnant.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's just like my body still having like, I've heard a lot of, it's kind of trying to figure out how to say this. Like I've read different things that says, in pregnancy, your pancreas can kind of like not like rejuvenate, but like it can make a little more insulin than what it had previously. And so because I only had it for, 6 to 8 months, part of me wonders if like pregnancy kind of jump started my pancreas a little bit. And so my head, I'm still treating it as if I've got like nothing there.
Interesting.
But my body is like, oh, we got a little more insulin here than what you realize. And I'm just not, just not reacting to it. I don't know. That's a good question though.
Yeah. Oh, please. Thank you. I say thank you because if I don't ask good questions, where are we at? Is the doctor talked about the fetus weight right now? Is it in a good spot?
It is in a good spot. Yeah. He's, we're having a boy. He's measuring it like 58th percentile.
Right.
But at the 20, our like anatomy scan at 28 or 20 weeks, he was at like the 98th percentile. And so I was like, all right, here we go. Like gonna have a big baby. But also my husband was like almost 10 pounds when he was born and his sister was as well.
Oh, wow.
So I think part of it is genetic as well. Like I think I'm probably just going to have a big baby, even if I didn't have diabetes.
Yeah. How's your A1C been so far the first 7 months?
Good. It started out, I think the first few I had when I was pregnant were like 4.6. And then the most recent one was 4.8, but it's probably a little closer actually to like 5.2 or 5.3 based on like what my average glucose is, they say.
Yeah.
your A1C in pregnancy can be like a little dilutional.
That's wonderful. You're doing a great job.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel good about it. Like I'm trying to remind myself that like, even if I was like at a 6 right now, that would still be great for pregnancy. But again, I have a little bit of that perfectionism mindset. And so I'm like, okay, the lower the better. And then my endocrinologist is like, okay, but being hospitalized for a low blood sugar does not mean better.
Not good. We don't want to fall forward onto the baby.
Right.
I can't decide if it's ballsy or stupid that you got pregnant so soon after being diagnosed.
Yeah. I know.
I really can't tell. I'm like, is she a superhero or an idiot? I can't figure this out.
I think part of it was like, we had already been married for a couple of years. And I think part of it is I'm a really stubborn person. Like I was like, I am not going to let this delay my timeline. And so then I kind of worked overtime to be like learning everything, getting the pump, feeling more confident. And then I think when I got pregnant, it was kind of like oh God, now I really gotta make sure that everything is good.
Yeah. It's everything's easy to talk about. Like I can do this. And it starts happening. You're like, oh, there's no getting out of this now.
Really?
Yeah, there's only a couple of things too that you're sort of like, oh, this is really happening. I can't change my mind, Well, it's okay. I mean, you're doing terrific, obviously. When little Scott gets here, do you anticipate like working or staying with him, or what are you going to do?
So I'll be able to take, like 4 or 5 months off of work. And then we're hoping to do like a staggered leave. So then once I go back to work, then my husband will take his full maternity leave. And then he'll eventually go to daycare. But
I think
you'll be sick of him
you'll be sick of him by then anyway. It's fine. You'll be like, oh,
yes.
This kid's here every day.
Right.
Yeah. Let's lend him out to somebody.
Yeah, here, anyone wants to babysit for free, he's all yours.
Yeah, come take this kid. Excellent. Are you planning on breastfeeding?
I am, yeah. And I'm very worried that like, because I've already had these lows in pregnancy, I've heard that, with breastfeeding and type 1 diabetes, like you can get like, there's just such that huge shift in needs immediately postpartum. And then I've heard from so many people that they just tank when they're breastfeeding. So I'm a little worried about that. I'm trying to like kind of start preparing myself for that and not really sure what to expect.
Well, no, I mean, I've heard both too. That it's really fascinating. Just the other day, one woman told me, she's like, my blood sugar never fell while I was breastfeeding. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I was like, everybody tells me how it does. And then one person comes along and says it's different. I'm like, all right, well, maybe it's not that way for everyone, I
know. Yeah, I do wonder. And like, I feel like because I work in labor and delivery, I have a lot of like background education on breastfeeding and like newborn care and stuff like that. And so it's like, it's not that part necessarily that's like terrifying to me. Like a lot of women that are pregnant are like, oh, I'm terrified of like giving birth and breastfeeding. And I'm like, I got the information. That'll be fine. It's like how type 1 diabetes is going to affect it. That I'm like, I don't really know that many people that have type 1 diabetes and then have breastfed. Like it's just a very small amount of people. And so trying to find those resources and like also getting resources from work, but then realizing that they're not necessarily applicable to people with type 1 diabetes can be a little frustrating. Yeah.
I was going to say that, there's so much that's, nice to say, but you're nice to read about, but in practice can often be different. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. You're going to have to forge your own way as you're going.
I think I will be. Yeah.
You're just going to have a kid in one hand and a juice box in the other hand. You're going to be like, all right, what's going to happen here?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. I've spoken to a lot of pregnant women who will tell me like, oh, like I'm definitely sticking with this later, like this new regimen I'm on, for my diabetes. Then the baby comes, they get tired, they're taking care of the baby. And the first thing they give away is their own health, which is just a common parenting thing to begin with.
Yeah.
But you'll hear people tell me a lot like, oh, my A1C has been rising since the baby was born. Like, have you thought about that?
I have. I will say I'm excited to like, even if it's not necessarily like loosening my control, even if my parameters still stay at like, 60 to 140 or 70 to 140, I think I'm excited to not be stressing about when my blood sugar hits, 160 or 170. Like it just right now, it's so much of like, it's a lot of scare tactics that educators and endocrinologists do. If you don't do this, then you can cause birth defects, or like, if you've got high blood sugars, you can keep, having your baby be big. And so I think obviously there's there's that part of me that's like, oh, I can't wait to relax and like have a little looser control. But I think there's a bigger part of me that knows it'll probably never really happen because I am too much of a perfectionist.
Are we calling this a mental illness or just the way you are?
I think honestly, it's a lot of stubbornness. Like I'm trying to like prove to myself that like I can do this. And I think a lot of it is not like you can do it and have a range of 70 to 180 with a good A1C. Like you don't have to have this like constant perfection all the time.
Wait till that kid's like 6 years old, gets sick, vomits on the floor in the living room. Your husband has the same reaction he had the other night when you left your stuff downstairs. And it's like, you know, you're 32 instead of 26. You'll let everything go then. You'll be like, I don't care what happens. Good luck to all of us. May we live through this.
Right.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's quite a journey. Well, very cool.
Yeah. I'm hoping that motherhood definitely like kind of reframes some of that for me. Like, I think having like being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes kind of rocked my world a little bit. And I'm hoping that having a kid kind of rocks my world, but like in a good way to kind of humble me a little bit on that, kind of tamper down some of the perfectionism. We'll see. I'm
sure there are other outcomes, but the prevailing ones, as far as I can tell, are it gets worse or you start smoking crack. I don't think there's any, I don't think there's anywhere in between.
Yeah, hopefully it's just, you know, it gets worse and then it'll get better and we can just leave the crack out of it.
There's either the people who are like, you know, just hyper focused on everything, trying to make everything work out perfectly, or those people who you're like, where are your kids? And they're like, I have no idea. And they don't look at all concerned about it.
Right.
Yeah. We all know a family. I actually, this is fantastic. I was once involved, as my entire town was, in a manhunt for a child.
Oh. Because
this family was called the police. The kid is gone. We can't find him. You know, the whole town is out looking for this kid.
Right.
Now, these people had, let me count on my fingers. They have 5 kids. Okay. So, I mean, I'm going to let you guess where the kid was while the whole town was out looking for him.
With the other 4 kids or?
No, he was in a side room asleep on a sofa.
Oh, okay. I love that. Just one of those things where it's like, by the time you get to the 5th kid, you're like, okay, he kind of blends in with everything else.
I love the idea that they were like, the kid's gone. Where's the kid? The kid. We looked all over. The kid's not here. On a sofa that just faced away from the door in that room. So the back of the sofa, like, you know how people sometimes put their sofas in the middle of the room, like kind of thing?
Yeah.
And so the kid's asleep on the sofa. Everyone just assumes that he took off out of the house and he was gone. He wasn't that young, by the way, either. And he wasn't that old. He was like, yeah. So anyway, everyone's out looking for this kid. He's asleep on his sofa. And I think that's what happens when you have too many kids. Just eventually you're just like, what does it matter?
Your brain is just rewired it just doesn't work as well.
Yeah, I don't know what happens. I think you're just up considering how much it's going to cost to send 5 kids to college, hoping 3 of them are stupid is what you're probably doing. And trying to decide, really? Because Emily, think about it. Say you had 5 kids. Which one do you wish is a dummy? You got to do that. You got to go.
Right.
One of these kids has got to not want to go to college. And by the way, you don't have to be dumb not to go to college. You know what I mean. I'm being bombastic. But like, you got to look at those kids thinking like, I hope one of them wants to do a trade, or maybe a few of them, or I can't send all of these kids or you have to turn to them and say, hey, you're on your own. Go take out loans. Like, you know, which I don't think anyone wants to do. And when you talk to young people specifically, like young parents, they're always like, we'll figure it out about paying for college. Please, between you and I, take this as absolute fact. You're not going to just figure it out. It doesn't magically get figured out. Yeah. What those people mean is, I'm going to make those kids take out loans when they say I'll figure it out. So, yeah, you just don't just scrape up $100,000. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Yeah.
No. I wish it did, but I know it doesn't.
Yeah. It's the whole thing's a horror. I mean, congratulations.
Thanks.
Actually, it'll be wonderful.
I mean, even just like looking at daycare right now, it's been like we have a couple tours scheduled later this week, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like the cost of daycare. I mean, we knew it was insane, but like, oh my gosh.
What's it cost now?
Well, we haven't got any quotes, but like I've been Googling, and like most places for an infant, like you can't do part-time. And so they'll be like, well, full-time for an infant is anywhere from like $300 to $500 a week.
Really?
Yeah.
What are they going to send the kid home gold plated, or are they just going to keep it alive?
I know, exactly. I'm like, are there other benefits included in this? And they'll be like, no, that's just the starting price. And we're like, oh, okay.
Wait, do they ask you, like, do you want us to feed it while it's here?
Right,
Wait,
exactly. And it's like,
as high as
so is
2K?
extra?
It could be as high as 2K?
No, I think so, yeah. And I mean, I live in the Midwest, so I think like it's probably a little lower here than it would be out on like either coast, but still, it's insane.
You can't find like a meth cook to take care of them during the day? They got to be everywhere. No?
Yeah, maybe not like the best supervision.
Well, not in the main building off to the side somewhere. So if there's an explosion, obviously the kids are safe. But now, listen, $962. That's what somebody told us in 2000. And that's why I became a stay-at-home dad.
Per week or per month?
It was a month, $962 a month. But you got to remember it was 2000. So it's 25 years ago. I only made like $1,200 a month.
Right. That's like your entire salary. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. So I made $1,200. We were going to spend $900 on daycare, and, gas would have probably eaten up, another chunk of it. And we were just like, oh, screw it. Like, I'll stay home.
Yeah.
That was before it was a thing. Like I took a lot, a lot of shade from older men for doing this. Like, yeah.
I mean, if we ever got to that point where like financially we could afford it, like my husband is a government employee and I'm a union nurse. So it's like we make good money, but it's because we have two incomes. And I'm always like,
yeah,
if that day ever comes where one of us miraculously stumbles upon a job that pays us insanely well, like I think it would be worth it to stay home. But I don't foresee that happening in our future, at least not for a while.
We couldn't afford it. Like, that's an air quotes thing. You know what I mean? Like, we needed that money, but we were going to be giving it away one way or the other. And as I mentioned earlier, the baby was already coming. There wasn't a lot you could do about it.
Right. Exactly. It's like, you got no option. You just got to do it.
This is what we're doing now. The actual act of staying home was beneficial beyond words, honestly.
I'm sure.
Yeah. For them.
I've heard people say that. I've heard a lot of people say that, like, they never regret quitting their job to be a stay-at-home parent. And I think, well, there's a lot. It's like it can be a very rocky road. Mm-hmm. Like, I think people in the end, from people that I know that have stayed home or quit their jobs to stay home with their kids, they'll say like, it's so worth it. Even if there are like the worst days in the world, I wouldn't have chose a different path.
No, I agree 1,000,000%. Honestly, like I can be like, flippant, but to be completely serious, it was the best experience of my life. I see what it did for my kids. It was very valuable for them. There were some long ass days that felt like they weren't going to end, and some long weeks that turned into long months. And I can still 25 years later sing the theme song to a lot of mindless children's shows. But overall, what it did for them, like the comfort, like I could even see it after my son went off to school, and then Arden was younger, so I was still home. Mm-hmm. Like even that knowledge that when you come home, there's somebody there, like that there's a home base, like kind of thing. It's manned, I think is a big deal for them. Yeah. A lot of little things.
It kind of like rewires their brain in a way to know that there's always going to be somebody there.
Well, plus if you can avoid that thing we were talking about earlier, is that whatever that draw is to be overly critical or concerned about unimportant things, and just use that radar to look out for the important stuff, not every 5 seconds, but when big things come up or things that you think, oh, we should address that later or take some time to talk about that. Being home with them allows that kind of mental space to recall those things and to bring them back up and address them and things like that. Like, but when you're running and then when you're finally home, we got to cook, wash those children off, eat, clean up, realize we can't,
and then all your time is gone.
Realize we can't have sex because we're exhausted, be upset about that, watch something on television, scroll on my phone and go to sleep. That literally your free time Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then you get up on Saturday and there's 1,000 things to do. It's that's tough. I will admit that the free time was never free, but it was more like unencumbered, less encumbered time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's a different type of free time than what it would have been if you and your wife were both working. Right.
No, for sure. And then she resented it at one point that I was staying home. I don't know if she ever used that word, but I mean, I saw it.
Right.
In fairness, I'd take him to the zoo on a nice day and send like a photo, and she was in an office. So, I might have pissed me off too. She was probably sitting there going, "Oh, is this what I'm paying for today?" Be like, "Yes, we're at the zoo." But
that's funny.
But it's incredibly fulfilling. It's been the best part of my life. It's a large part about why, I'm as happy as I am now, and I think as happy as my kids are. So
right.
I can't tell about my wife.
So
I don't ask her.
I love it.
Yeah. No. Oh, yeah.
They're in college. They're not going to give you real honest answers, probably.
Oh, I meant Kelly. I don't ask her. She's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's her fault. She shouldn't have got pregnant. She should have seen me and run the other way. I don't know what she was thinking. She should have never let me trick her into marrying me. That's for sure.
Oh, that's funny.
Did this boy trick you?
Well, we were friends for a while, but we got engaged like when I think I had been out of college for like maybe 6 months. We got married pretty young.
My goodness.
Yeah. Part of me is like, we never really knew anything different.
Emmeline, what were you escaping? Bad parents? What is it you haven't told me about? You have a bad house? What are you trying?
I haven't been escaping anything. Just was part of it is, okay, we went to a small Catholic college. We are not Catholic, but it's kind of hard when it's like you go to a school like that because everyone's getting married and everyone's getting engaged. And so then you're like, okay, well, we've been dating for 2 years. Why don't we just do that too? And obviously it was the right decision. But I think if we hadn't gone to a small school like that, we would have been like, oh, we can wait a couple of years. We can have a long engagement. But instead we were like, 6 months out of school, let's do it. Let's get married.
A lot of Johns, Patricks, and Marys getting married where you went to school, was there?
Yes.
Yeah. You're pressured by Catholics? Is that what happened?
It definitely is like a world of its own.
Can I call this episode Catholic Peer Pressure? Maybe I can.
Sure. You can call whatever you want.
Well, actually, that's true. It's my podcast. Do whatever I want. But it's wonderful. So is there anything we haven't talked about that we should have? Like, I want to make sure we're hitting your points.
I don't think so. No. Yeah. I think kind of being diagnosed as an adult and going like through pregnancy it's been a whirlwind, and it's kind of one of those things where you're like, this is going to be like, I'm going to look back on this one day and hopefully be like, oh yeah, this has changed my life for the better. The type 1 diabetes part, obviously the having a child part will change my life for the better eventually.
I mean, listen, if the kid ends up like, being a real asshole, I don't know. Maybe not. Right. But
you
won't know that for decades. It's fine.
No, it'll be a while before we figure that out. Yeah. But I think part of me is like, all of this hard work and like all of the tears and all the struggles, like it's gonna like make me a better person eventually, right? And I think part of it is like, I've taken care of a couple patients working as a labor and delivery nurse that come in to be induced because they have type 1 diabetes, and it does feel almost kind of like an honor to be able to take care of them, because it's like we're sometimes like the only person on their medical care team that gets it. Mm-hmm. Part of that is nice, but sometimes you do wonder, you're like, God, like this is just like a really sucky situation. But hopefully one day down the road, I'm going to look back on it and be like, okay, I learned a lot.
I like the way you think about it. And I think that, again, you do get what you expect. It's not just in diabetes, but in life too. So if you expect that having a baby, and if you expect that having a challenge that you're rising to will make you a better person, I bet you it will. I think a lot of that is attitude.
I will say though, having only been diagnosed for as long as I have, like, I came to accept it fairly quickly. Like I was very like on board with like, all right, well, I can't change this now. I'm going to have to just accept it. And I think part of me is kind of like, I could have been in denial for a long time.
Of course.
It just wasn't worth the energy for me because I just knew there was nothing I could do about it.
Yeah. Hey, this doesn't happen very often, but you're definitely one of the people that I'm thinking while we're talking, I'm going to keep this podcast going for 5 more years so you can come back on again. Like, seriously.
I would love that. And then I'll have a 5-year-old that's screaming in the background that I'm just like, you know what, Scott, this wasn't worth it.
I got to tell you something, Scott. First of all, you were right. This kid is a little dick. Now, the other thing is my husband is still bitching at me when I forget something. And still got that government job. I don't see anybody trying to do better for me. I had to stay home anyway. We're broke. It's fine. But no, I mean about the diabetes, because, you have the right attitude, you have the right knowledge. Now I want to see if it kicks you in the teeth or if you kick it in the teeth. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But it's going to take years to find out. So now you've motivated me to keep the podcast going longer. It's 2024.
Oh, well, glad I can help.
All right. Let's say 2024. Let me do some math. This is math you can't know about. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Make this much money, this many more years. Yeah, I can't even stop then. Okay, I'll definitely be around in 5 years.
Okay, perfect.
I was like, at what point will podcasting allow me to retire? And then I was like, never.
Never.
This podcast will have 9,000 episodes, and I'll be like, I gotta go to the hospital now. Go to cozyearth.com.
At least you'll still be doing a service for the people out there that are like, what is going on?
Emmeline, this is the last thing somebody will hear. Get an Omnipod. And that's just me hitting the table. You know what I mean?
And us being like, do we need to call him? Like, is he okay?
Oh, yeah. Well, see, here's the plan. I don't know if you know this or not. I have an editor named Rob. Now, here's the problem with Rob. He's my age. So, like, the plan is that I know this is weird, but I've had a conversation with my editor already. And it sounds like this. If I die, take all of the remaining episodes and edit them up. If I still owe advertisers ads, throw the ads on them so my family doesn't have to pay back money.
Right.
And post them once a week until they're all up. So, yeah, this podcast could go on for easily 6 months before I die. And after I died, and you wouldn't even know it. How crazy would that be?
Yeah, that's one of the things when you are recording so frequently. It's like, well, you've got a lot of content that you can just keep putting out there.
Can you imagine if in the last episode, this other voice comes on and somebody's like, hey, this is Rob. Scott died 6 months ago. I've been putting out the content since then, but this is the last episode. So thanks for listening.
People would lose it. They would have no idea what to do.
Be amazing, wouldn't it?
Oh, gosh.
I only wish I could be alive to see that happen. But it's not going to happen unless I'm kind enough to die to let it go. But I'm super skinny now, so I'm not dying. I'm good.
There you go. That's true. That's true.
I just sized my pants down again.
Oh, good for you.
Thank you. A 34.
Oh.
You're not a boy. You don't know. You're like, what? I don't care.
Yeah. Men's sizes. I'm like,
I don't know what that means. 34 sounds so big to me.
I do know that men's sizes and women's sizes are very different, but also in context, I'm like, I don't know.
My waist on my pants has gone from a 38 to a 34.
Do they go in like 2-number increments or 1-number increments?
You know, you can actually get some in betweens. You could get a 30.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, every once in a while they'll make an off size, but it's 2-number increments.
Oh, so that's like 3 sizes,
but
right?
It's inches. It's 4 inches. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, that's a lot. That's incredible.
I had to buy a new belt when I started losing weight, and then I sized it and put it on. And the other day I had to take it off and cut 4 inches off of it. I was so excited.
Wow.
Yeah, I was so excited. Today, I took all of my extra large and double extra large t-shirts and I went and donated them to a charity.
Wow.
Yes.
That must feel good, doesn't it?
I thought about what they cost for a second, but overall, I felt good about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I was like, get $4, $8, $10, $20. Oh, God damn.
You're like, this is a lot of money.
I hope somebody appreciates this. I'm sure they will. But nevertheless, yeah, no, it's been pretty cool. So you were terrific. I didn't ask you, but I normally do. I know you said you listened to the podcast and that it helped you, but did you go through the pregnancy episodes?
I did. And I think when I had first reached out to you, I don't think I was pregnant when I reached out to you for the first time, because I was like, I've gone through all of these episodes and I still am like, there should be more, but it's such a small group of people. But I did go through a lot of them. Like having met with Jenny was helpful. And yeah, it's just hard because I feel like every experience you either can relate to, or you're like, I still feel like can't relate to anything. And I feel like I was kind of somewhere in the middle and appreciated the insight from the episodes, but also was like, oh my God, where is this other stuff about being diagnosed as an adult? Like, it's kind of.
Yeah, it's tough because I find that if you do too specific information, like if the content's too ultra specific,
then it's not relatable.
And only people who think that it relates to them will listen to it. And so that's why I've kind of gone more the route like the Pro Tip series, because I think honestly the Pro Tip series can help you be pregnant. No problem. It's just totally. Yeah, the variables are just going to be supercharged.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
but if you start saying this episode is for, I don't know, blonde-haired people with brown eyes who are between 5'6" and 5'9", who got type 1 diabetes in their 30s, you're going to be like, no one's going to listen to it. I'm going to be out of business and there won't be a podcast.
Right.
So, yeah, you can't get too drilled down where you end up eliminating too many possibilities for people to listen.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are some podcast episodes, too, that I listen to that, like, I mean, you throw the little synopsis on there and not even that, but it's like you relate to them more than an episode that you thought you were going to relate to just because of, the perspective that the person has.
Oh, yeah. I can't say this because it'll sound like I'm saying it just to say it, but you should listen to all of them. There's something in every one of them. Like, if you don't hate me too much, listen to all the episodes because
I have listened to a lot of them. It's just like it's working your way through all of them that's taken me a while.
I'm prolific, Emily. You can't come down on me for that. I record the podcast once a day, Monday through Friday.
So, I mean, look at your...
Yeah. I'm recording again in 2 hours today. I'm doing a thing with Dexcom's, what is he, the EVP maybe, Jake's
coming. I saw your post about that on Facebook this morning.
Yeah, Jake's coming on to talk about, what are they calling that new, the CGM for people who don't use insulin? Stello? What is it called? I don't know.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, but I also can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, it's fine.
But I saw an article about it.
Yeah, so like we're going to do a little talk about that. I'll hit him with a couple of questions about G7 and stuff like that. But then tomorrow I record at 1 and at 3. I have a 4:30 call with an advertiser. I record twice on Monday, once on Tuesday, once on Valentine's Day. I don't know how I got that to happen. And then somehow I have twice on Friday, but have off on Thursday. So, off from recording. But anyway, seriously, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I'm recording 28 times in February.
Wow.
So
it's a full-time job.
It is a real job, that's for sure. But I can afford daycare now, but I don't need it anymore.
It's okay. You've outgrown that phase of your life and you're in a different
they
phase
still
now,
want
so
money,
fine.
by the way.
They do.
In case you're wondering. My oldest son's birthday is in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
He is 2 years younger than you, and you are gestating a human being. And he still looked at me the other day and said, my car needs a battery. I don't know how to take care of that. So.
It's okay. To be fair, if my car battery died, I would literally go to my husband and be like, either can you help me fix this, or I'm just going to take it into the dealer and pay however much they want to charge me for it.
The Go machine won't go. All right. Well, I think the best thing we came up with here today is using meth cooks as daycare. But you all listening might have heard something better. I don't know. Emily, thanks so much for doing this with me.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. It was awesome.
It was my pleasure. Hold on 1 second, okay?
Okay.
Arden started using a contour meter because of its accuracy, but she continues to use it because it's durable and trustworthy. If you have diabetes, you want the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. There's already so many decisions. Let me take this one off your plate. ContourNext.com/Juicebox. I want to thank the Eversense CGM for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Learn more about its implantable sensor, smart transmitter, and terrific mobile application at eversensecgm.com/Juicebox. Get the only implantable sensor for long-term wear. Get Eversense. Huge thanks to Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% off of your entire order. Are you starting to see patterns, but you can't quite make sense of them? You're like, oh, if I bolus here, this happens, but I don't know what to do. Should I put in a little less, a little more? If you're starting to have those thoughts, if you're starting to think, this isn't going the way the doctor said it would, I think I see something here, but I can't be sure. Once you're having those thoughts, you're ready for the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. It begins at episode 1000. You can also find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu, and you can find a list in the private Facebook group. Just check right under the featured tab at the top. It'll show you lists of a ton of stuff, including the Pro Tip series, which runs from episode 1000 to 1025. All right, guys, I'm out of here. Do me a favor. If you need or want anything that is sold by one of the sponsors, please use my links. When you do that, you are supporting the production of this podcast, helping to keep it free and plentiful. and you're just helping me out. I pay my electric bill with this money. I keep the podcast going. I'm not saying buy something you don't want, but I mean, if you're getting an Omnipod, then go to my link. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.